Well, the Galaxy is finally out, and now we can talk fully about this ship and all three of its different versions that it can come as, and the base model too. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you're a long-term subscriber, thank you for sticking around. Greatly appreciate your support. Okay, now there's three different places that we're going to be talking through. So if you're wondering, where did I get this, where did I get that? There's three places I go to: the store sale page, the brochure, and the ISC double header that covered the C8R and the Galaxy itself. So bear in mind that the content that was in the ISC technically is slightly dated. Sometimes those are pre-recorded. When they have their discussions, it might have been recorded 2 weeks ago, etc., but it's very recent. The actual sale page and the brochure that came out at the same time, that were literally released this morning as of, well, I'm recording this going from November 26th into November 27th, so technically to me it's the end of the day, but earlier today. It's been quite a weird turn of events. I'm going to go into the pricing towards the end of this video. Please use the chapters if you just want to jump to pricing and purchase ideas and strategy there. So the first thing I wanted to go into is that the Galaxy is a two-story ship. I think some of the images that are floating around, including inside the brochure, do not cover both floors. They simply show the modular floor. There is an entire floor above that floor that has the habitation, the captain's quarters and captain's desk type area, and also the bridge. The room towards the front of the modular floor, I am not quite sure what that smaller room is for, but it looks to be some kind of armory slightly behind there, and then the modular support rooms. So there is like this control command center, I would call it, that each one of the modules has access to, where there's this like half hexagon that overlooks the module room. And in the case of the cargo bay one, it is where based on the concept drawings, it seems to be the control center for the tractor beam gantries that are above the heads of those working inside the cargo room. In theory, you could be manipulating cargo without even being in the room. You're standing in the room next, the small little hexagonal structure next door. And it seems to be some type of administrative room right behind that, or storage room, etc. That seems to be for the workers. So we'll dig into that a little deeper, I think, in a future video, and as this ship kind of progresses. But I'm going to stick to exactly what's on these papers as best I can, and also cover something that I think I need a nuance about refining specifically from my previous video. So first things first, let's work from the outside in. There is a extra small hangar, I would call it, in the back. It is designed for a Pisces or an MPUV cargo or MPUV personnel, one of any of those type of ships. It is likely not going to be able to fit an extra small fighter. So if you're picturing something like a Gladius or a Buccaneer or something like that, it is highly likely, unless the ship is elongated during the pipeline production of the ship into becoming a flyable ship. If it's slightly increased in length, maybe. But in its current circumstance, it is simply too short of a hangar to fit those type of ships. Additionally, the width-wise, in general, CIG likes to have some space on the sides for AI to maneuver around, for players to have egress and entry, and different kinds of ships have different entryways. You know, some ships have a cockpit. You have to physically walk up to the front of the ship, which if it's facing, you know, towards the outside, access is going to be an issue if the wings are literally taking over the whole hangar. So bear that in mind as well. So in general, though, the MPUVs and the Pisces will fit perfectly. One small note I would note is that the Pisces in all the art is like flying face forward in, and I think that's a terrible idea. If possible, I would recommend backing into this ship if the ship isn't moving, like if it's not under attack or in a rush or something, because if you're flying, say, a C8R that needs people to be treated in the med bay door is facing the hangar. but it would be facing the front of your ship if you're flying heads first in. But if you back in, literally drop the ramp and bam, you're able to go right through the doorway into the medical facility. Same holds true for cargo. If you're moving small amounts of cargo, a couple SCO cargo with a traditional Pisces instead of a medical Pisces, the C8 or the C8X, you would want to be basically facing backwards in order to have access. And technically the same holds true for the MPUVs as well. The MPUV cargo and the MPUV personnel, the access to the cargo areas is on the back of the ship and on the side of the ship. In the cargo circumstances on the side as well as the back. And there's a jump seat in the bottom of the cargo bay too for the MPUV, by the way. So that's something else to remember. If you're thinking, do you need the Pisces for the 3 seats in the traditional Pisces or the 2 seats in the C8R? Technically you don't. The MPUV cargo, a little cargo hold that could in the bottom is, first of all, it's modular. It disconnects if you need it to be. And second of all, it has a jump seat in the front of it. So that's something a lot of people forget, myself included. I double checked that before I did this video. For those who've been around for a bit, you know I do whiteboards for a lot of this stuff because I'm just trying to make sense of it myself before I can confidently talk about something. And this ship, I've been kind of going off and on, you know, doing this or doing that, and then coming back to that whiteboard and just keep changing it. And one of the things I have circled on there is talk about turrets, exclamation point, exclamation point. So sticking to that theme of talking about the outside in, there are 3 remote turrets. So that's nice. So you don't have these 50 hallways. However, they are basically, aside from the missiles, I'm going to go into in a minute, they are the only weapon systems on this ship. 3 remote dual size 5 turrets. And the layout right now is on both the left and the right, and they have very good firing arcs for the most part. There is some blind spot at the rear of the vessel, but because of the design of the front of the vessel, they have very nice firing arcs. They're sticking out very far, and unfortunately, the rear of the vessel is blinded to them. On the bottom of the vessel, and one of the early concept arts, it seemed like the turret was centralized on the bottom, so I thought, oh, that's perfect. At least some of that back blind spot will be protected. However, on the final design, that at least for this concept sail, just to be clear, it could change yet again, it is a chin-mounted turret, a lot like the M2's turret. So, with that size 5 remote so far forward, it presents a difficult problem. It'll probably cover well all the bottom of the ship. However, the back of the ship is still exposed. Now, the most amount of firepower that you're guaranteed to be able to fit in this ship would be a C8X, or a traditional Pisces, by the way. If you have the old C8, like you picked up one of the early Carracks, and you didn't get a chance to get the C8X model that comes with the 4 size 1 guns, it only has 2 size 1 guns. Those hardpoints are still there. Okay, I got to double check that, but they used to be, and you were able to mount 2 more size 1s, so you could have 4 size 1 guns on the front of it. But regardless, the point is that the C8X configuration of 4 size 1 guns on the Pisces is the absolute maximum amount of firepower you can have on a vessel that is parked on this ship, ideally. Now, one of the fun things about this is that I would love to test the 125A. One of Mason's favorite ships, the 100i series of ships, may be able to fit in that cargo hold. Sorry, the hangar. Now, we need to look into that a little bit more. But the 125A is still on the lighter scale of weapon systems, but it certainly is hyper maneuverable. And I would want that in my fight more than the Pisces if possible. However, you lose all that utility of one of the Pisces series of ships. So that's a lot to think about. But for now, just keep in mind, you do have some options to cover that back end. And at the end of the day, though, my emphasis here is that this ship is not meant as an offensive weapon, except if you were absolutely desperate, like everyone in your org gets all hands because you're losing your outposts, you have to defend something like that, something that's desirable. And this ship is the only thing you got, or of this size, caliber, etc., or it's already in use and you must use it. Ideally, in that circumstance, you would be part of a small fleet And then all of a sudden, the deficiencies of that small blind spot are not that bad. With the slowdown of SCM combat coming up, completely changing the game for small ships that are not going to be able to just zoom and boom and zoom and orbit constantly as quickly and easily, and slowing combat down dramatically. It shouldn't be that hard for fleet members to clear your backside of a small fast mover. And I could even just see one hurricane traveling around with this thing, and all of a sudden your problems of worrying about something small are relatively over. And those size 5s are going to hurt. 3 triple size 5s is nothing to sneeze at if you can get the crew to man them. So 2 to 3 crew members would be, at a minimum, would be advisable for this ship if you want to be able to defend it. If you're in extremely safe space in the future, who knows how that's going to go, but there is response time by defenders. So I still don't think this is really the ideal ship for a solar folks. Maybe a 2-up at the minimum, I would argue, even in safe space, but it's just me. Everybody's different. Additionally, to add to the combat capacity, you have a size 3 shield surrounding the vessel, as opposed to the dual size 3 shields on the 600i series of ships like the upcoming Explorer and Touring. It should be noted, however, that the 600i has 3 pilot-mounted fixed size 5s on top of the vessel, and then also enjoying a turret on the back end to protect it. So while it does have additional pilot control weaponry, and it's actually a great solo vessel until something gets behind you, so it's great for PvE or once again in fleets. It has a lot less size 5s. So, I mean, literally half the amount of overall firepower. Now, how much of that can you get to bear on a target in ideal circumstances in PvE, for example? I think it would actually do quite well until that size 3 shield gets burned through. So once again, if you're in a group where you can kind of shoulder some of the fire, somebody else can take the heat for a bit, it's probably not going to be noticeable. But if you're by yourself, it's a problem. Finally, wrapping up the weapon systems, you have 2 size 4 missile racks, each one with 4 size 2 missiles. So missile racks have always been kind of weird how they work. However, the size 2 missiles I think are actually a good idea in this case. We just got done explaining that you have a massive blind spot in the back of the ship. So the goal here is going to be getting those remote turrets and those 8 size 2 missiles on something that's a fast mover that can really do a lot of damage back there. Until armor gets implemented and sizes of weapons matter, the Hurricanes, for example, come to mind. Even when you do have armor, the Ares series of ships, especially an Inferno, come to mind. You want to prioritize all of your DPS on those type of ships, and then hope that the rest of their fleet is not a fast mover that you're fighting against. And once again, that's a very basic level. I'm sure people that have more combat experience in this game can certainly weigh in on this. And I'm sure the final product will change a little bit. If I was to guess, I think the chin-mounted turret should move back to the middle of the ship and stay there. But that's just me. I don't know. Okay, so on to the main event. The ship is being presented in the original concept sale now as a cargo variant, a medical variant, and a refinery variant. And what to keep in mind here is that they do have a section there hinting at other possibilities in the future. I would operate on what's here now. So just be careful of thinking, oh, maybe it'll be like a mini Endeavor. There'll be science modules of different types. Maybe there'll be a telescope, an overclocking capacity, a science lab. And me just speaking these words into the ether, I think, excite a lot of people, myself included. But I had to catch myself and think, okay, what would I need right now, and what could I operate with no other modules for years to come? Well, if this ship gets released by the time Pyro rolls around, which is, they said, one of the goals of this ship the vision is that it's a longer sustainment ship designed for Pyro operations and less ideal circumstances where you have to stay out for very long periods of time, and it needs everything on board it needs. Okay, well, but it's an industrial focus, not military or combat focused ship for that capacity. All right, I get that. will these modules fulfill that need? This long-term aspect out in the edges of space and the dangers of pyro. Well, I'm not going to rehash the entire discussion about fleet operations and how this is important, but I will say this is an org ship. So if we're thinking about cargo, yes, as multiple people have pointed out, it's basically a caterpillar in cargo space. However, the way the cargo is arrayed is very, very nice. You've got that nice big elevator that also can fit an Ursa rover based on the concept pictures I've seen. And you have that same cargo elevator, obviously without an Ursa rover sitting on it, can have decent sized modules. The larger style modules can be transported, and then also cargo pods can be transported that are very decent in size. So I actually find this ship kind of interesting to me. It gave me pangs of like the Taurus, the cargo module variant. And yeah, I think this is really nice. I like how it's all in the same room. I like how it's able to use that elevator. And then also it gives you the utility of having that door in the back of that pod. If you're looking at the pictures of the pod, that door to the right side and up, that's the hangar right there. So if you have a ship like an MPuff cargo, it would really work symbiotically with this room very well. And it gives me a lot of the vibes of like an Odyssey to a lesser extent. You know, an Odyssey allows you to actually roll whole vehicles into the cargo room next to the hangar that's much bigger than this hangar. But the point is that this is a viable ship. If you're out on the fringes of space and you need something that'll sustain, well, this ship has what it's going for. Now, I will point out the obvious here. If you have that cargo module, or the refinery for that matter, and you do not have medical, it's that simple. And that kind of takes away a little bit of that capability to operate in the far distant edges of space, etc. However, if you're part of an organization that has, say, access to an outpost or a space station, hopefully in the future outpost will have that capacity, I would like to think, regeneration, or at the very least medical facilities at a basic level. Or if even better, you have access to, say, a space station or some other ship that has medical already. Any ship within your organization that's active at that time, and you have your clones registered with, suddenly medical, not having medical is not the end of the world. And plain and simple, you shouldn't be dying that often once this game's fully realized and there's a lot less bugs. I didn't say none. Get out. But I am saying that there should be a lot less opportunities to die. So hopefully there'll be more injuries that you can then treat. And technically, if you're worried about the medical completely, you could keep a C8R parked in the back with the tier 3 bed that can keep somebody from fully dying. You can drag them over there. If your buddy goes down, you can put them on the bed, and then you can take the whole Galaxy or just the Pisces medical C8R over to get some help for them. So there's a couple different options here to tie in medical. But once again, it goes back to that aspect of if you're operating with even just one other ship that has medical, suddenly it's not the end of the world. If you're operating in an area that has medical nearby, not the end of the world. Okay, but yes, 512 SCU is not knock your socks off anymore. You know, there's multiple ships. I think of the Herc series, I think of the Cat, that are great competition for this ship. Now, I will say that the habitation on this ship is fantastic. And why I say that is 6 Habs that are set up in the modern system are quite viable and quite useful, because the way it's set up is you don't just need a bed to log off in. When you log back in and your character's there, all your gear is going to be needing a place for storage. You're going to need access to hygiene. You're going to need access to different things. And what that access has by having an entire room dedicated to each hab means that, even if it's small, means you'll have a nice safe space to store your gear in while you're locked out. And then when you log back in, you're back to your work gear, your combat gear, whatever it is. So having those habs is not a waste of space. It's not a waste of a whole floor of the ship, as I've seen one of the comments on the Spectrum thread say. It's critical, once again, for operating out in the edges of space. And on to the next one, which I think is actually going to be the most popular of the options, the med bay. Unless you're going for price-wise. We'll go into prices in a little bit. The difference in the prices between these modules is not that bad. Once again, I'm going to avoid going fully into them right now, but it's not considerable. The med bay is basically an Apollo glued into the middle of the ship. So in the Apollo, you can have 3 tier 3 beds, 2 tier 2 beds, or 1 tier 1 bed in 2 separate what they call operating theaters or operating rooms. I've heard it said both ways. The Apollo series had these customizable rooms as well. However, the Apollo has been delayed due to the medical drone that's supposed to pick you up and bring you into the bottom of the ship, and then it's meant to bring you into one of these rooms, as I understand it, or the crew is, and then get you treatment. If you look at the med bay, it actually has a nice little space for the doctor, you know, the clinic worker, whatever you want to call them, and then the 2 operating theater areas that have the beds. And by having this customizable system like the Apollo, you gain a lot of versatility. For example, you can have a single tier 1 bed and then across the hall have 2 tier 2s. So when there's situations where somebody needs to be respawned with all their health, or somebody got treatment from another ship but now needs the best treatment, you have that tier 1 bed. And then if they don't need the absolute best treatment, you can turn to them and go, whoa, 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 that's not a serious injury. Go over to the tier 2s or even the tier 3 beds if you want to go that level, that low of level. And there may be a good reason. Medical in the future will have consumables that you will need to take in and you will need to keep on hand. A ship of this size, even without that beautiful 512 SCU cargo module, will have some space for medical supplies. Even in the concept drawings for the med bay module, you will see that there's a ton of medical supplies, like these minute pallets that are coming up on the elevator. And I would say that that is an important factor in all of this discussion. Movement of large amounts of resources in and out of this ship, and this ship certainly has it in spades between the small hangar, extra small hangar, and that elevator system. The refinery is slightly different. We're going to go into that in a minute, but both the cargo and the med bay have huge elevators. And based on how it looks, at least on the current med bay module, it looks to be the same elevator as the cargo module. So what is interesting to me about that is, in the future, you have URSAs and things like that. You may drag somebody in the back of any type of vehicle, preferably a vehicle with Atmo, and if somebody's dying, you race them back over to the ship, bring them up into the med bay via the elevator, the entire vehicle, and then drag them out of the back of the vehicle inside the atmosphere of the ship, where you can yank their helmet off, you can start throwing drugs in them when they need them, and then drag them over to the bed and get them fixed up. Some nice stuff there. Pretty neat. I would not be shocked if there's an URSA rover in the future that has medical capacity. Tier 3 bed, for example, just like the C8R. It kind of is begging to have one. But anyway, that's me speculating, just to be crystal clear. Put the pitchforks down. But I feel that the medical facility is an excellent choice for those who want an Apollo that can't get the Apollo right now. I'm sorry, but this is the deal. This thing is here. Will this concept come out before the Apollo? That's up to CIG. Based on the fact they're trying to aim this at Pyro, I wouldn't be shocked if this gets fast-tracked compared to the Apollo, unfortunately. Especially with the drone tech that they don't want to tackle right now, or at least they're not ready. It's not ready yet. And finally, the refinery module. So this has 2 refinery reactors that remind me a lot of Satisfactory, the game. It seems like they're just kind of like assembly plants where you can run both of them in different ways. And it seems like that's ideal because refineries currently take considerable amounts of time. And if you watch the ship, The Expanse, if you watch The Expanse videos discussing the updates about refining and how it's going to operate, and also if you look at the Expanse Q&A, there's some great little bits in there about how the refineries with player operations are going to change. And one of the things they emphasize is it's not going to be an AFK type capacity. So bear that in mind if you're considering this module. It is not an AFK capacity. It is something where at least one player is going to have to supervise this constantly and keep an eye on things and check for impurities, check for issues in the development of the thing, make sure the correct chemical precursors are in place for the refinery to operate. The fact there is 2 refinery reactors in this system is very nice, because that means you have 2 different processes running at any given time. Now, the Expanse, as in the ship, has supposedly 6. Now, once again, that's all subject to change until when the ship's finally released and fully operational, whereas this one has 2. But based on the size of this refinery space inside this ship, it begs the question, are these refineries bigger? Are they on a bigger scale than the Expanse, which is a smaller vessel? I think they are. Based on what we're seeing, literally, if you look at the module, it is significant in size. Both the production facilities on board are considerably large. Additionally, this is the only module that has a smaller elevator than the other 2. And I think that's worth noting. It is really meant to basically open that bottom up and then tractor beam in dump bags off prospectors and such. And then those containers are then basically inserted into the process. And then the refinery does its magic. As a player, keeps an eye on it, make sure it's actually doing what they want it to do, and then it creates this finished product that is then distributed. Now, in my first video on this ship, the first look video, I talked about possibly having refueling capacity. And what I really meant by that was, in the Liberator Q&A, they talked about having the ability to have hand refueling. They basically said nothing stops players from hand refueling. And so my thought was, if you have a refinery on board and it can do liquids, then in theory, this could at least do localized fuels, and maybe even quantum or something like that, and be able to do at least one or the other, refine them on the site, have the literal things fill with fuel, and then have what's the equivalent of hand refueling. Use a tractor beam, bring the module over to the Pisces in the back or the MPUVs in the back, and refuel them. And it should be pretty fast process if you have just a massive container full of fuel that you just refined and made into a usable product. Now, that brings up a lot of things, though, because that hangar is not even big enough to fit full-scale fighters. Unfortunately, if they could, that would be really cool. Having an entire fighter wing that you can support to be able to bring them across a large system like Pyro, and then have like a midpoint somewhere and go, okay, look, we're going to this little no-name area where nobody's around, nobody's scanning for us based on our results. Okay, everybody take turns coming in, and we're going to refuel you for the next leg of this journey. That would be really cool, especially if you have a refinery on board, because then you can go, okay, not only do we not have to bring all the fuel, we can bring partial for, say, the first leg or 2 and make this part of the experience is we bring one prospector, and the prospector goes and gets all the fuel for everybody. I can dream, right? Now, I think the Odyssey is going to have a better chance at this, although they keep saying up and down that the Odyssey can only basically mine fuel for itself, and that severely limits it, etc., etc. So, where does that leave this ship? I do not believe it's going to have the ability like a Starfarer has to be able to have this remote refueling capacity for an entire fleet. Unfortunately, I think the hand refueling is extremely limited. However, it's still an interesting concept in the refinery aspects. Having the ability to take raw fuel materials, turn them into real workable, usable fuel in your ships, and then be able to, even at a very slow rate, move them into the back. Even if you're just shoving an MPUV cargo full of fuel canisters, physically flying that thing over to another ship, and then like throwing an EVA style out the damn thing, and they're pulling it in their docking collar, you know, or their docking collar opening even, or their cargo bay, etc. It's possible. And that's what excites me about the refinery, is this idea of players coming up with new and innovative ways to use this thing. even if it results once in a while of a fuel kind of drifting past the engine exhaust and blowing up once in a while, right? But still, I digress. Having 2 long refinery reactors is pretty interesting, and I feel like that's more manageable than 6 tiny ones or whatever number it ends up being for the expanse that are on a smaller scale. I would be really interested to see this come true, even though I'm not big on mining and refining. I do it occasionally for fun. I do have a mole. I do enjoy having it, how it crushes things down for me, the raw materials, and then taking it back to the station and having it refined. I'd like to see players being able to do more of that on their own. And I certainly love the idea of having fuel. It's kind of useful, right? So back to topic. The Galaxy, just rounding out the brochure, we've got 1 size 3 jump drive, 1 size 3 quantum drive. The important factor here is it's big enough to get around on its own. It's able to physically jump drive into another system and bring an extra small ship with it. And because of the size of the quantum drive over time, that will become more and more important. The bigger the size of the ship tends to make it go faster in quantum. That could change again and again and again. So just bear with me. But the fact that you have the traditional stuff you would expect on a large ship of this class really makes it a nice touch. Okay, so I've covered all 3, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. No module. So one of the surprises with this sale, I guess I'll do pricing and I'll also talk about the no module at the same time because it's relevant. One of the options with the sale was and is that you can buy it with no module. You can buy the base ship, a lot like the Endeavor, a lot like the Retaliator base. The Tally base and the Endeavor both come that way. The Tally base's loaner is the Tally bomber. And in the case of the Galaxy, the loaner is a Carrack, which is incredibly good deal for the base. In the short term. Long term, you know, that's up to you to decide what these modules are really worth and if they're the complete ship. I would not run this ship without a module. But that being said, here's the funny part. I own one now. I have a CCU from a 400i to a Galaxy standalone with no module. How does that make any sense that I've said both those things? Plain and simple, my argument is I intend to buy the modules in-game. Traditionally, the modules are worth less than the stock ship. So what's going to happen here is having a Galaxy with LTI or 10-year insurance is important. Having the modules have this amazing insurance and being able to buy them and not buy them in-game, etc., is less so important. Now, the way the modules are priced kind of set me back because it's like cargo's like 70 USD, 70. That should really be a little lower to me. I don't really think that cargo is really a knock your socks off thing. Maybe 50, 40. You know, the fact it can do 1 rover is nice, an Ursa. Maybe if it held a Spartan, which is impossible for the sizing unless you put the elevator sideways and took up some cargo space, but still. I just don't see it as like this extremely desirable module. However, the medbay and the refinery that cost more, medbay being 90 USD and the refinery being 80 USD respectively, are to me the real reason to have this ship. The cargo module is definitely going to be something I pick up in game, just like the other 2, but I will prioritize the medbay first. Based on my org needs, I see that as the most valuable. And I'll probably pick up the refinery module shortly after if none of my org mates have a refinery ship that they're willing to constantly have around. Even the small expanse, we could do it as a trial balloon and see how well it holds up with our needs for the occasional mining time we do with a mole. And if it can't keep up, maybe consider this Galaxy refinery module if I'm hearing from people that it's worth getting. And then finally the cargo module. So basically that's my strategy, is that I'm going to have the base ship upgraded from a 400i. Once again, right now I'm still enjoying the 400i. Once this is in game, if it's looking good, I'll apply the CCU from the 400i to the Galaxy, and then slowly earn in game the different modules. If you have an org backing you that have ships of this size already, it will be very, very easy to earn these in game, the modules. The question mark is going to be more so, will CIG hold the modules buyable in game back to try to encourage people to buy more of these modules. Because when this ship's finally flyable, those modules will be back for you to purchase. And finally, I would mention that that's another thing not to worry about. The ship itself might be a good option for you to pick up. The modules might be something to sit back and kind of go, well, let me see how the final piece of each one of these modules look. Maybe that refinery is not so beautiful when yet another ship comes out, or an Orion comes out, or something else comes out that is buffed up for refining. Maybe the med bay isn't so desirable if the Apollo suddenly comes out as a surprise at the next fleet week. And that's what it is. This game has a lot of surprises. I got to tell you, the biggest surprise was CIG having the desire to put this ship out at such a low price point, literally at the shelf. The low shelf to me on this price point was the Phoenix, and the Phoenix is $350 USD, and the base model of this ship, the Galaxy, on Warbond is $350 USD. That is incredible. And honestly, probably I would never have predicted. I think I said 400 USD, and people were saying that's too low. However, I did believe it would come with the cargo module for that price. So it depends on how you look at it, I guess. But the credit version at 380 USD, especially if you're CCUing from something, so you're not paying the entire thing, or if you have a lot of store credit laying around, it's certainly a good option. If you do buy a CCU, I would not recommend applying the CCU for any concept. It's not me picking on this ship. Always keep your options open until you have to take part in these ships. Once they're finally in game and you can really get a feel for them. If you're in the concierge, there is a Galaxy Plus protector paint, which is only, I think it's 13 USD. And I would recommend that. The paint doesn't look too bad. And paints tend, if you're new to concierge, paints from concierge tend to be rare. People tend to push for these paints. In some cases, I've heard of people paying 2 or 3 times the cost to buy the paint off somebody just to have it. So if you do nothing else, it would be worth, if you have the credit, the $13 paint would never hurt. As for the actual ships in their current configuration with these modules, the freighter is at $415 USD. The hospital's at $430 USD, which I consider more like a clinic. It's just an Apollo. Nothing wrong with that. Apollo's incredible, but it isn't a Hope class endeavor. That's for sure. I would call it a hospital, a flying hospital. And finally, the refinery at $425 USD, just $5 USD less than the hospital. And the complete packs are at $530 USD for the Warbond variants and $570 for the non-Warbond variant. Note, if you are going to pick up the complete pack, be sure to grab, and with Warbond, be sure to grab the concierge model that comes with an extra free paint. It's the first one on the list on the left side. Now, back to what I promised. There is a way to buy this ship as a standalone without any modules, like I did. And is that worth doing? And what are you going to get for your money? Well, is it worth doing? Yes, I absolutely believe it. Like I laid out, you could buy the modules later, or you can buy them in game, which I intend to do. And I would also say, yes, it's absolutely worth it to buy this ship just based on what you don't get with those modules, because you will get the modules over time, and you will keep the 6 Habs, the one larger one for the captain, and then the other 5. And if you look in there, you've got full meal services, you've got rec services. It looks to be like an armory, possibly, on the bottom floor. Basically, we've seen these rooms that are these long rooms that are designed that way. The 600i has a nice revamp one we saw on the new shots from inside that Golden Pass 600i series, and tends to have like those double benches. It looks like that. Could be something else. Could be changed yet again, even if it is. But it looks like some kind of armory. And then also you have that hangar, that extra small hangar. Additionally, if you have no other ship that is of this size, being able to just go into Pyro with this ship is wonderful. And once it's out. And then the short-term benefit of this ship is going to be that loaner that's a Carrack. That is awesome. And I can tell you right now that the Carrack is a wonderful ship if you haven't had a chance to spend some time on one. It is a multi-crew vessel, but that's what this is as well. and a couple people in a carrack, and you're going to have a wonderful time. So I don't see a downside. At worst, you pick up a CCU to this thing, and you sit on the CCU, or you apply it to get that carrack, ride it out, and you're sitting at a price point just at the high end of the Connies. I can't disagree with this ship. And I think that CIG really knocked it out of the park. If I had to pick on something other than the lack of a turret on top, they like some of the original concept art had, and the bottom turret really just even moved back a hair. If I had to pick on something, I would say that the lack of the ability to CCU to the different versions with the modules is a frustration. It sucks that there isn't a Galaxy Freighter, or Galaxy Hospital as they call it, and a Galaxy Refinery within the system for you to be able to CCU to. You can only CCU to the non-module variant. But I stand by that the modules are not going to be that costly in game, considerably less than the hull of the ship, and the fact that this ship has LTI or 10-year on it, and depending on how you buy it, when you buy it, etc., if you're listening to this in the future, I would say that it's still worth a buy. And I don't see this as the only modular ships, even counting the old ones and any new ones. I don't think it's going to take over the game. I don't know why, but it seems to be like two different folks I've talked to seem to have this belief that all ships now are going to be modular, and this is a ploy to get people off the CCU chains, to devalue the CCUs. I don't see that at all. I think this is a symptom of modularity of these ships. There's a few ships that are going to be modular. Some are in the past, some are in the present, and some are in the very far future, like the Endeavor. And they're a very small amount. They're a minority of the number of ships in the game. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. This ship is not going to be for everybody. I guess that's the way I'll sum this up. It's just, who is this not for? If you're really looking for a combat vessel, and you're even considering the complete pack, like the 570 or something like that type pack, USD price point, with credit, get the Polaris. Do not pass go. Get the Polaris. If for some reason you're concerned about the crew number and it's got to be just 2 to 3 people maximum, maybe look at the Perseus. But bear in mind that the Percy is very small distance, and the services it offers are nowhere near like the Polaris's. It's a smaller target. It's not as expensive to probably run because it's not. It's a quasi. It's not quite a capital ship yet. But if you're considering these ships, RSI does have some serious combat options. This is not for those type of operations. Now, if you already have a ship like that, or you have ships, maybe you like smaller ships for combat, it's very viable in this game. Heck, ask anybody with a Hurricane or a Scorp. I would look pretty hard at this ship if you're thinking of an Indy focus, and you just want one ship that does Indy. Well, or I guess I'd rephrase it as utility. If you don't want a Cat and an Apollo, and what else do I need? Dang it! Like, I would consider this ship as an all-in-oneer, where you can, you can refine in the mornings with your mining crew and your org, and help support them, and then by noon you're changing the conversion over to the med, and you're doing some FPS gameplay and having some fun with your friends and doing missions in the bunkers and such, and then at night you're running cargo for your outpost. This is that kind of ship, and I think if you're in that mindset and you happen to need the long range of this ship, that's a lot of ifs there, but I definitely see the value of this ship. If you were considering something else, I would compare it pretty hard against the M2 Hercules, which is a great buy in game, but not a great buy in the store. Good armor, has the same kind of chin turret, has some reasonable weaponry, is great in Atmo, and it has that massive cargo hold in the bottom. But it does not have no refinery or med bay. Like, if you're just thinking of a pure cargo vessel, even just in this kind of design, I would look at that. And there's nothing quite like this in the other areas right now, especially with the Apollo on Indefinite Hold. So yeah, that's all I got on this. I hope that this kind of longer discussion about the ship kind of helped you out. Once again, I do try to use chapters. I do try to go through these things, but I had a lot of thoughts on this ship, and it basically feels like 4 ships in one if you count the non-modular variant. So I hope that this longer expounded discussion, and I was trying to be as careful as possible, because I realize, you know, the guys and gals out there, I know you're considering maybe purchasing this or picking it up with credit, and that's a serious thing, moving these things around when you start getting to these bigger ships. And, you know, please, if there's nothing else you remember about this discussion, talk to your buddies, talk to your org mates. If you have even just one person you fly with, feel them out and be like, hey, do you have refining ships? Do you like medical? What do you not like? What are you not into? What do you feel that we really have we have missing, or what would you like to try out, even at that level? If there's no spark there, or you have somebody who's a diehard in that capacity, it's really not worth picking up that module for it, unless you feel like, hey, I might be at a different org in the future, or maybe different time zones I need to cover. Just start thinking of building out your fleets that way. You don't need to cover every single thing. But for those who are the solo diehards or really small orgs, that you're that person who really needs to pick up the slack for everybody, you know who you are if you're that one. This ship is wonderful to fill a lot of to check a lot of those boxes for your fleet. All right, that's all I got. Please put comments below if this video helped you, and I do appreciate feedback, both positive and negative. I promise. I don't have too thick a skin, but I have some. And fly safe.